Today, this video is to cover dimensional models from a practical point of view, not necessarily the theoretical concepts point of view, but how to put together something from a word problem statement into a basic dimensional model. Before we get into that, let's start with this basic pieces of information. So a dimensional model typically starts with some kind of fact table. And that fact table extends off into dimensions. So you might have a single dimension table, or you might have a dimension table that's part of a hierarchy and continues on with additional tables. Now, the problem exists, or the problem that does exist for some students is when they read a problem statement, how do they determine what is a fact, what is a measure, and then what belongs as a dimension, and how to put these together in terms of fact tables and dimension tables. So with that, this should provide us with a little bit of perspective in how to make some definitions, or how to put some definitions together with this. So first is to understand what each component is. So based on the Kimball group, facts are basic measurements that result from a business process, but it has to have a measurement event as described by a fact in that table's grain, right? And grain is the term that we use to be able to describe the level of detail that the fact table has. So basically, it is a physical, observable event and not to the demands of a particular report, right? And this is all about the idea of the decision-making process. So we can always think of a fact as a basic row that we're going to create in a fact table that will combine all of our dimensions and our measures together, that will be able to describe a particular observable event. So a measure is nothing more than a numerical property of a fact. So it's quantitative, right? And it's relative to the analysis required. It's numerative and additive. So both facts and measures are represented in a fact table. So we have that expressed in this drawing. So we can see that we have measures that are numerical in nature, that typically exist at the bottom of a fact table, at least when we sketch them out. And then we have some relationships between the dimensions in the forms of foreign keys and primary keys, and when they're all combined, these create those facts. All right. So now a dimension is a who, what, where, when, why, and how type of context around our business process event. One of the most or the easiest ways to consider what a dimension is that dimensions are nouns, right? They can be hierarchical, and if you're familiar with table normalization, these can be denormalized. They describe objects that are part of the business process, right? So although that fact may be able to describe an event when all of the nouns or the actors of a business process come together, those individual actors or components make up the dimensions, right? So again, when we come back to this table, when we're constructing our dimension tables, just think that these are typically nouns such as employees, customers, products. It could be an insurance agency, whatnot, that when combined into a particular event usually have some kind of measurable outcome. Like a salesperson sells a product to a customer, and then there is a dollar amount set to that particular event. All right. So I'm going to stop there with that presentation, and let's get into a word example. By the way, that presentation can be found in our course webpage, and there should also be a lecture associated with that particular PowerPoint on this channel. So let's take a look at this particular exercise. So this is exercise, what I'm calling Lab 0403, which is where we're going to be working on creating ER diagrams or database diagrams, depending on how you observe those. And for the purposes of this course, we're considering those to be the same. All right, so here is our word statement right here, all of this information combined. Okay. And in that word statement, what we're going to start looking for is the dimensions, the measures, and how all those come together to create a fact. So I've given you some questions below asking what are the dimensions, what are the measures, and then what is a fact, in order to be able to kind of design an ER diagram around this. So let's kind of start to take a look at what is potential candidates for both a dimension and a measure. So first of all, we have a vehicle repair shop that has fleet cars that come in frequently for regular service. So this gives us an idea about the type of business that is being analyzed here. So each service has a service code and description. So we also get an idea that service code and description belong to some type of object, and that object in this case is going to be a service. So a service in a auto repair shop might be like an oil change, or it could be like window wiper replacement, that type of thing. So we know that service is a potential dimension for this problem. Let's go back over it and let's kind of see if there's other types of things that we can pull out as dimensions. So each vehicle is serviced, or each vehicle serviced is a certain type and make. Well, type and make are also attributes of a noun. Those attributes belong to the vehicle, so we know the vehicle must be also another type of dimension. So that a vehicle arrives at the shop and a mechanic will inspect the vehicle. So we have a person, which is a very common noun, that will inspect the vehicle and then provide a diagnosis. So some of the output of that mechanic's work is going to be a diagnosis. Right? They do the inspection and there'll be a diagnosis. So far we already have 4 candidates to be dimensions. Each diagnosis has a code and a description. So these are going to be attributes of that diagnosis. And then the chief mechanic at the repair shop wants to be able to conduct these types of analyses. So far we have 4 dimensions. We have, I'm going to start all over here. We have the service, we have the vehicle, and we have the mechanic, and then we have the diagnosis. Now here are going to be the type of reports, and they should have these 4 dimensions included. So we have count, the number of services. So boom, services is there by week and by month. Now, one thing that's not very clear when it comes to fact tables or dimensions in a type of analysis project is time based on the calendar is also a dimension. So we know just by this first statement that we have a 5th dimension, and it's time. Okay. So to keep the videos rather short, I'm going to pause right here, and I will continue with discussions on what are the dimensions and what are the measures of this particular project.